Hello, G-Fan. Today I'm covering episode numero 10. And I just wanted to get this out of the way with, might as well, Godzilla 1998. The film that has so much controversy behind it that it's left a mark on the Godzilla community. And for many years, hated bitterly by the Godzilla community. Uh, Although I think in recent years people are trying to like it just a little bit more, and they've even come to embrace Zilla as his own monster. Which, you know what, to me, I'm fine with that positive movement. I don't want to ever embrace Gino as a true Godzilla incarnation ever. He definitely should be kept as his own thing. But you know what, for its worth, if people want to like the monster itself, go right ahead. Even the show itself, I found Zilla an intriguing character, or Zilla Jr., I guess, a separate incarnation, but all the same, design, blah, blah, blah. The movie itself, however, there's so much behind it that I can never get behind the actual movie itself, and I don't want this to be your same old boring bashing of Godzilla 1998. However, though, I'm going to talk about a lot of aspects to it. I guess the best way to start this off is with the history of the production. Anyone knows anything about this movie, it went through many script variations. The most famous one being with Godzilla fighting a monster called I believe called the Garuda or something of that nature. Basically, a movie that sounded a lot more like a Japanese Godzilla film, which involved him fighting another monster, but was scrapped, of course, due to supposed budgetary concerns. Now, to me, seeing a Jurassic Park had just came out, I don't know how that possibly could have been a big problem, especially at the time, because in the 90s, I don't know about so much now, although some people are still using it, believe it or not, but in the 90s, people were still using miniatures and models to make movies, and they were still combining with CGI as well at the same time. Some of the main things of that, I don't know, Roland Emmerich's the director, of course, and Dean Delvin, the producer. They're the guys, well, if you didn't know, they're the guys behind this movie, Roland Emmerich and Dean Delvin. If you didn't know, they also directed Independence Day. And Independence Day used a lot of CGI, but also used a lot of miniature work, especially for any scene that involved the city getting blown to shit. The famous White House scene, where the White House is ultimately destroyed by the blast, by the alien ship, was a miniature. It wasn't CGI, it was really there, and then it was blown to shit. And it was really big miniature, so it was a little different than most of the miniatures at the time, probably, but all the same, the goal was the same. You know, you married two different type special effects into one to make a pretty good thing. So to me, the excuse that the budget would be too big to have two monsters fighting in the city sounds to me like total bullshit. But all the same, though, I'm not here to talk about a failed project that never came to be. So in any case, a new script was made. This one, which Roland Emmerich and Dean Delvin apparently said was good for the budget, so they went with it. Roland Emmerich and Dean Delvin. At the time, they had done, I guess, the Stargate movie, which to this day I haven't seen. I took watched a few episodes of the show. I never actually watched the movie though, or anything of that nature, because it wasn't my thing. And of course, at the time they had done the big box office giant Independence Day, so of course it looked attractive to Toho to have this guy direct. Uh, what they should have known though was the style they would bring to this movie, and I guess you could just say generic would definitely fit the bill very well, and definitely more focused on the special effects, but not really in a good way, and a lot of humor. Human characters are about as dull as they come in this movie. Uh, Getting down to it, the cast: Matthew Broderick, Jean Reno. Let me just sum it up very quickly as I can. I don't want to go into the cast too much. The cast is, to me, is crap. The only cool character was Jean Reno, but even then, can't really get into him that much. I mean, you don't care for him. He's better than the other characters, sure, but by no means a great character. And the rest of them are there for a comedic and simply fill voids in the story, pretty much. Matthew Broderick, very poor lead, man. I definitely would say he's just kind of the nerd who ends up getting respected. That's basically his thing. We've seen the story a million times, and I'm not a fan of it here in the Godzilla movie, of all fucking places. His romance interest also did not really catch my eye. And then the rest of the cast, who really cares? They're all filling comedic roles basically. No one really is important or even, I don't know how to sum it up. It's just like, I don't know. If you look at the movie, watch it again and again. Like I'm pretty sure I covered this in my Godzilla ranking of the Godzilla series. A lot of the dialogue in the movie's comedy driven. There's very few times anyone's taking this movie seriously, and that's kind of one of the biggest problems to me. No one really cares about the movie. No one really seems to care what the hell is going on. Every performance is just dead, and no one cares about the spectacle of a giant monster. It's kind of more of just like, well, we have this giant creature now. Yeah, let's make a joke or two about giant monsters and Hershey's Kisses and the next year's elections. For Christ's sake, that's what you worry about. The next year's election for mayor. Okay, well, all right. In any case, so the story of the movie is pretty basic. Uh, a nuclear test on French Polynesian islands mutate a marine iguana, the marine iguana to freaking enormous size. And yeah, it goes to New York to make a nest, and from there it becomes a human's burden. To me, that was a problem. To me, the tone of the film definitely doesn't match any Godzilla film, where Godzilla's kind of like this, kind of like, I don't want to, make it be too pretentious, but Godzilla's more like a godlike figure. Everyone's always amazed. They want to understand the mystery behind him. Gino, or Zilla, whatever you want to call him, Godzilla 1998, is basically a pest control problem in this movie. He's here. He's not really a threat because all the destruction in the movie is not caused by him, or if it is caused by him, it's indirect. Basically, destruction mainly comes from the military trying to kill him. So yeah, that was kind of a waste of screen time, don't you think? And then of course my problem is he's comparable to Locust. I'm pretty sure I said this before, to Locust or Rats. If he keeps going, breeding, he'll overrun the whole world. Which is kind of like what they did in the 2014 film, which the Muto was a much better monster in a lot of ways than Gino. But I love how they kind of pulled the prank on Gino just by having so many attributes of the Gino storyline attributed to the Muto. The whole pest control problem. It made the sheer difference as opposed to Godzilla. The movie, because it says 14, Muto was a pest control problem that they get rid of, while Godzilla was a godlike figure that they were amazed of and in shock to see every single time. See the contrast there? That's the tone you're supposed to get for Gino, but that tone wasn't there. He was, like I said one more time, a pest control problem they had to get rid of. He's stinking up the city with his shit and his eggs. But that said, I'm not going to go over the things that people always bitch about this movie, of course. His un-Godzilla-ness, not only in tone, but also in look, in sound, in abilities. All the things, of course, they all got completely wrong. In fact, if I had to think of a single thing he has in common with Godzilla, I can't think of one. Maybe that they're both reptilian, I guess. That's about as close as an estimate you could possibly say. There's literally nothing alike between them other than that, and maybe having spikes on the back. But of course, the spikes look radically different. The stance of the monster is radically different. The roar of the monster, I guess there's similarities, but it also kind of sucks. The abilities, of course, are very different. The eyes are very different. I mean, especially when you look at the time, of course, you couldn't really go on the Showa Godzilla designs, I guess, because they wanted something more realistic, quote unquote. But at the time, they had the Heisei Godzilla, which to me is one of the best incarnations of Godzilla ever. At the time, Godzilla was going through a very odd evolution that worked out pretty well to his design. He was still a reptilian dinosaur-like creature, of course, but he also had a very mammal-like face, kind of. Especially Godzilla 1985, Godzilla 1984, whatever you want to call it. And they introduced the whole ability of Godzilla to bare his teeth, kind of like a wolf, so you can see the gums, the big fangs. It looked really great, gave a lot of emotion to the character. And of course, they would go on to add even more features like the little ears, the mammal-like ears, the mammal-like muzzle, kind of like a feline type of looking face, kind of. That really added just the strangeness and overall greatness of Godzilla's design at the time. The Geno design is none of that. It's just a dinosaur with a kind of Moby Dick looking head, and I say that because it looks like a head of a sperm whale attached to a dinosaur. Of course, in scale, the head is a lot smaller than a sperm whale's, but still, the basic concept is there. A square head, literally a can rectangle of a head attached to a T Rex's body. Of course, with longer, creepy looking arms that I don't really care for, and the spikes are alright. I mean, as a design, he looks okay. Just to try and call that thing Godzilla was blasphemy in so many ways. But yeah, summing that whole section up, Zilla is definitely not Zilla. Mm-mm. He just was Zilla. I mean, Zilla is Zilla, but it definitely was not Godzilla. Sad thing is, like I mentioned before, 1994 script. If you look at it, and I'm pretty sure everyone's seen it by now, there was an initial model made for the 1994 film, but man, it looks so much closer to what Godzilla was supposed to look like. It's a damn tragedy that it didn't get used. It looks so much more like Godzilla. It looks a little different than the Toho incarnation, but the point is, it looked a lot more like it. Was upright. Yeah, it had more dinosaur-looking feet, admittedly, but it still looked more like Godzilla. The spines looked awesome, and it had a more imposing face than fucking sperm whale T-Rex thing. In any case, as I said, my Godzilla Fallen years ago, this film to me was made as a pure cash intake of a thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure at the time, Dean Delvin and Roland Emmerich were researching what next big disaster movie to make, as they would continue to do after this movie, Unimpaired, but Day After Tomorrow in 2012. Their whole thing is disaster movies because it's quick, easy, simple to make, really. The concept is always the same. They saw Godzilla. Godzilla at the time was doing very well in Japan, box office wise, but they were not getting a lot of big releases over here. They not had theatrical release since 1984 film, which was butchered when it came over here. So with that said, they saw basically an easy, as far as I'm not saying, I'm just gonna call it what I see, and they saw a quick, easy way to make a buck, and that's pretty much what they went for. They tried to make an Americanized version that was just bad, and wasn't received very well. Box office wise, the movie still did fairly well. It made double its budget. The problem is, it was not the box office juggernaut that Independence Day was. So of course, any idea of a sequel was immediately abandoned, and yeah, but there was a toy line, of course, and a show where they tried to recoup some of the loss. And I'm not gonna lie, at the time I was very excited by the movie. But even as a kid, I watched it, and I was like, "This movie was all right," but I feel like the Japanese was a lot better. And even as a kid, like, just blow the mind. At the time, I was what? I was 6 years old when I saw this movie. I was 6 years old, born in good old 1992. So I was 6 years old when I saw this movie on VHS. I watched it, and I'm not gonna lie, as a kid, I thought it was alright. It had some interesting parts, tone-wise. But I still prefer the Japanese ones a whole lot more. And see, now why is that? Why is that even as a 6-year-old kid, I enjoy the Japanese ones more with a much smaller budget than this big Hollywood giant version? Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, creativity. If you're going to have a Godzilla solo film, it needs to have an impact. Godzilla 1985 had an impact, Along 1954 had an impact, because they were very dark, gritty films, and when you felt Godzilla's presence in those films, you felt horror, terror. What the hell is that? Oh, it's like, like I said before in this view, it's a godlike being that no one really truly understands, and we don't know what to do about him. In this film, it's very simple. He's a giant mutant monster. We need to get this fucker out of the city, kill him, try to kill him. The only problem, the basic problem of the movie is they don't know how to kill him. They know how to kill him. They know they can make him bleed. Is pretty spot on early in the movie. The only problem, they don't know where he is. That's the only problem. We don't know. He's like a rat in a restaurant, I guess. He's hard to find, but he leaves a trail of eggs and shit. You notice that with the first two Godzilla movies, I should say 1984 and 1954, Godzilla doesn't bleed neither one of those movies, and it's for a reason. It's to show a godlike status. He's not like the usual creatures we know. And Tomoyo Tanaka said that himself way back in the day when the first Godzilla movie was being made, that when you have monsters bleed, not only was it because of he didn't want to ruin for children at the time, but also because, as I'm pretty sure people have heard before, when you make a god bleed, it takes away the godliness. And all that trend would dissipate over time. It's still pretty much the first rule in any Godzilla film that he's not meant to be hurt. by what's surrounded by human capacity. The only thing that really ever makes Godzilla bleed is usually another monster, in a sense, another god. Therefore, there you go. The 1998 film did not broke that rule entirely, and the tone, like I said, the way characters view Godzilla is just very different as opposed to Japanese ones. So instead of having, if you have, like I said, summing it up, if you have a solo Godzilla movie, he needs to be a terror that we don't understand and struggle to understand. I mean, when you look at Godzilla 1984, once again, I keep having to compare them because that's what this film, I guess, was trying to emulate to a certain extent by being a solo Godzilla movie. Look at 1954 and 1984. They both had a scientist character who understood the destructive capabilities of Godzilla, but also kind of understood him to a certain sense. It was sympathetic towards him. We had Dr. Yamane in the original one, and I'm sorry, I forget the name of the scientist character in Godzilla 1984, but when you think about it also in looks, obviously, they tried to emulate that. There was a character who, was sympathetic towards Godzilla, and he knew what the terror what they're going up against, but he still knew in a way it's not even Godzilla's fault this is all happening. It's man's fault. And that's very well done. So, even though there's a scene in 1954 which is very critical to that whole thing of being a mystery we don't quite understand that should be studied, Dr. Yamane regrets that Godzilla is going to be destroyed before we even understand him. Of course, this comes back to haunt him later when the military fails to destroy Godzilla, so Godzilla comes back and wreaks unholy hell on freaking Tokyo. And in 1984, the same quandary is brought up, but this time the scientist is more, he knows, after 1954, of course, they know what he's capable of, and they say, we need to destroy him, and of course, he cooks up the plan to finally get rid of Godzilla. But at the same time, he's there warning people that, the planet of Super X, you use your military might, it's not going to work. And then, of course, 1984 is also good because it brings up the whole morality and politics thing and weapons. There's several political debates in that movie about whether we should outright nuke Godzilla to just get rid of the threat immediately. And of course, there's very entertaining scenes between the whole debate of why we should not be doing that. All that drama and tension that could have went into this movie was not used at all. And once again, this is something that they definitely used in 2014 to very great effect. It made you really sympathize with what they're going through and make them really understand the situation they're in. None of that was brought up in the 1998 film. That's why it sucks so badly in comparison to the Japanese ones and the new 2014 one. But I think I've covered enough about bashing. I mean, positivity-wise, I'm not gonna lie. There's some great shots in this movie. There are some work with miniatures, sparsely, but there are some there. And let me be frank. The action scenes, to me, although they had no point, a lot of them are entertaining to a certain extent. I mean, they do get boring. Nowadays, when I watch it, it's like, yeah. But at the time, they're entertaining scenes of Godzilla trying to avoid the military. But it's when you start thinking about what the hell's going on, it does get kind of shitty. But they were well-staged scenes for the most part, especially with the military. It was always comedic. To the stuttering guy, attack, what's going on, blah, 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 blah. It was funny and bad at the same time. That's what made it entertaining to watch. The several times after I started learning how bad it was, it still made it entertaining to watch at times. I would just pop it in like, well, let's check this thing out. Of course, to me, the ending is so really bad. So this makes this. I like the ending because the composer for this movie did a very decent. I won't say decent. That'd be insulting. I said the composer did pretty well. David Arnold, he did pretty well with what he had to work with, I guess. I still prefer Japanese scores, obviously, to this one for a lot of reasons, but he still tried to capture that sense of wonder at the very least. And there are some, like this, the whole scene when Godzilla 1988 first shows up, and you don't really see him at all. You just see his feet and the spikes and tail at times. That's a great intro scene. It really is. It's just a shame they cannot capture that kind of tone for the rest of the entire freaking movie. But that first theme when you see those spikes rise up, dun 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 dun, that was great. That was freaking great. If only they could have kept up that tone for the rest of the freaking movie. But the score was pretty great. I liked it, and especially near the end when the poor 1998 rat creature locust thing is trapped. You get some very tragic music playing, and I like that. The problem is, The problem is when you think about it though, like where is the tragedy in this? No one in the movie gave a rat's ass about him. At the very split second, you see people stare at Godzilla as he dies, and Matthew Broderick stares into his eyes, and you get the feeling they're going to be kind of sad, but they cheer. They fucking cheer. Now, let's go into this again. I hate to go back negativity because I just got them praising the score. The score was great. Anytime Godzilla has been losing or near death in a Japanese film, there was never praise. Even 1954, when Godzilla freaking had to kill thousands, millions of people probably, no one cheered when he died because so many human lives have been lost at the time, including Dr. Serizawa, who sacrificed himself to beat Godzilla. Even though they won, they also lost in a lot of ways, and the threat was still out there for more danger. No cheers were to be had. They simply took off their hats for all the people they lost during the whole war against Godzilla. Same thing in 1984. No one cheered when Godzilla was finally beaten. They simply looked up to the volcano where he was trapped, and there was just tragic music playing. And then, even in 1995, the film 3 years before this one, when Godzilla died, it was a tragedy. He's a great character, and it sucks to lose him, even whether he's good or bad or neutral. It sucks for Godzilla to die. That's the point. 1998 film, when Godzilla died, the people cheered. All the characters were ecstatic. The burden that was Godzilla, the nuisance, the leech on their society, had been removed. Everybody cheered. The romantic interest kissed finally. We had a few more jokes. There was a hint at a sequel, the Baby Godzilla, of course, box office reasons, was scrapped. And there you have it. The movie ends with a Puff Daddy song. Well, I think I've covered in a brisk 20 minutes or more why this movie sucks ass in so many ways and what they got so much wrong. If you want to watch it as a blind monster movie lover, I mean, as a monster movie on its own, it still has a lot of problems in comparisons to other things like King Kong and other monster movies that have recently come out. But, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I own this movie because it's the one collection where I decided to be perfectionist and have all 30 of the Godzilla movies, so I do own this one. But, yeah, it's definitely in the lower tier of Godzilla movies for me. And even as an American film, as a standalone film, I think it's still a lower tier film in a lot of ways. But because it has so much writing on it, so much history, about like 30, 40 years of movies writing behind it, on top of its shoulders, Zilla just could not hold up the weight. So yeah, that sums up my review of Gino, or Godzilla Name Only, Zilla, Godzilla 1998. Oh yeah, score-wise, what do I want to give this movie? I'm definitely going to give it a 5 out of 10. And that's just being realistic for me. 5 out of 10, although technically I could go so much lower. If I wanted to just rate it as just a comparison to the Godzilla movies, I would definitely give it like a 1 out of 10. Most definitely. But on a film, trying to be as logical as possible and trying to be, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The word is lost me right now. But, objective. Trying to approach it from an objective and Godzilla fanboy standpoint, I would just give it the middle range of a 5. There was very little they did right, so much they did wrong, even as an American movie, in comparison to what was out at the time or would come out after. And to really make that comparison come to light, I would compare it to something like Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is much shorter than this movie, has also some boring characters, but when they start fighting, it's done entertainingly. And, Pacific Rim was a lot more fun. 1998 is a movie that has a share of the same problems that, that Pacific Rim has, but Pacific Rim is more fun when it needs to be more fun. 1998 drags on for too freaking long. The movie, if you didn't know, is 2+ hours. It's 139 minutes. My God, I think it's like as long as The Dark Knight. Or maybe just a little bit under, but it's almost as long as The Dark Knight. For people who don't know, movie length-wise, 139 minutes means 139 minutes is 2 hours and almost 20 minutes of crap that you have to sit through. Pacific Rim, I'm pretty sure is like an hour, 50 minutes. Much shorter for a movie that admittedly is not the best quality, but at least it gets towards going a lot faster than this one does. So with that said, I'm finally done with this review. I finally got this one out of the way with for the Godzilla Dissection series, and yeah, I'm glad I put those thoughts out there, and I finally video pretty dedicated to this one movie that was bad. See you next time, Godzilla fans. Now, to anybody who is saying that, Josh, you said you weren't going to bash the movie brutally for the entire runtime of your video, that's exactly what you did. Well, I'll tell you, I was being honest. But, in all fairness, for me doing this, I will now review one of the worst Godzilla films of all time, to be fair. So next, Godzilla Dissection, number 11, I will be doing Godzilla's Revenge. That's right, Godzilla's freaking Revenge. See you there.